Well, welcome back, baseball fans, to the coverage of the 1978, 79, 80, 81 Fall League. Digging into this a little bit early, looking at this particular draft. I got the two leagues running in the spring and the summer. The spring, summer, and then the fall. The timeline, of course, is 70 to 73 in the summer league. It begins in March and runs through September. And the fall league runs from mid to late September through the end of the year into early January. And I upload the Super Bowl, or during the Super Bowl weekend, I put the World Series matchup in there. But here's an early look at the fall league draft, because we've moved cards around, and we're not quite ready for the 70-73 draft, so I thought I'd dig into this a little bit. Here's just a review of the draft order. And remember, Baltimore beat Cincinnati 4-1 in the World Series, so this is drafting teams 32 and 31, of course. And of course the 8 fourth place teams, and then the next group of teams that didn't make the playoffs, and of course the final playoff teams, the final 4 league championship and World Series teams. So tonight we're going to just take a quick peek out of who could be picked in the first round of the 78 to 81 draft. This is always fun to get an idea ahead of time. As far as if there's a team that's seriously lacking in it, they might want to make a deal from another organization. As we see in the NFL, these draft time trades, trading up for the first pick in the draft and things like that. So let's see what we have. We'll get through the 8 teams tonight from 1 to 8, the last place teams, and see if they got some guys that could be taken in the first round. Starting with the Expos, who had a disappointing season. It's a good timeline for them, and it's getting better, 78 to 81. But they had a disappointing year last year, so let's go straight to the 25-60 now that it's been sorted. And again, let me review the sort. The 2,560 players available in the years of 78 to 81. 640 cards per year for each individual draft, and then spread throughout the expansion teams. Draft eligible players are sorted by teams who currently either possess the player or the rights to the player, alphabetically by team. And when you scroll down, you get to approximately, Toronto is last, there we are, 1,933 players are under some level of control by the teams in the carryover league, which leaves just under or over 560, about 610 players who are completely unencumbered and can go elsewhere. 2 complete years of 78 and 79 have no attachment whatsoever, and they can go anywhere they want. The 1980 season, the next to last season, guys who were not picked last year still have limited control by a team. The team usually parts ways if another team wants the player and just has to surrender a draft token. And then the full control are the 81 players, as these would be rookies, and you generally do not trade your rookie class to another organization. So what we do is, first thing is we look at the team, the Expos. BUR stands for Burlington, the the non-fiction baseball town I placed them in. They of course have in green their 12 carry-on guys. The draft is 8 players long. This light green shading would be if I wanted to improve one of these guys with a better year of theirs. And I've done an analysis of that for the carry-on guys by team. Not a lot this year, believe it or not, which is a good sign. It means that the guys were picked in their best year most often. Here, Cromartie has a better 81 than his 78. This is how you read this. The year is here. Players 1 through this number. 6 78s, 4 79s, and 2 80s. So what this is telling me is that Warren Cromartie's a little bit better in 81 if I want to improve him. Gary Carter's a little bit better in 80. And Andre Dawson's a little bit better in 81 if I wanted to improve a player. A lot of times, I don't do that if the player is already good. Because I'll eventually, for instance, Cromartie, I'll eventually get his card next year. Gary Carter, I'll get that card in a year or two. Same, and Andre Dawson, same thing. So the cards are coming, but if I wanted to expedite the process, I'd bump it up to one of those years. So nothing there really stands out. Let's go back to the, whoops. Here we go. So then you have your 4 guys you want to keep, and these are usually the first things, the most important things. You have to have good keepers, and sometimes they're foundational pieces, players who it's obvious they should be the first player chosen. And in this case, the only foundational guy I see is Steve Rogers. Steve Rogers, lifetime Expo, and an important part of the Expo history. Rudy May was a nice free agent acquisition. Buddy Schultz and Elias Sosa. Nothing screams there. But if Steve Rogers was the first pick in the draft, he's got 4 very good years to choose from. ERA below 2. It's 247 in the year of 78. And then 3, 298, 342. He could be a first-round pick. But, you know, what about a new face? Is there a new face in the organization that is waiting to get into the league? And so we're going to go to the future year, the 81 year, for the Expos, because I scouted this one out, folks. And the 81 class is rich, as you can imagine, for the Expos, the Blue Monday year. They have an outstanding Ray Burris, who finally puts it all together in his second organization. They have Bill Gullickson. They have Charlie Lee. They have Scott Sanderson. All those pitchers are dynamite. But the name on the list that jumps off the page, and if it's a Hall of Famer, I want to get him to the first pick in the draft. I always like to get a Hall of Famer or an MVP, someone like that. And here we have Tim Raines. Tim Raines, rookie year of 1981. Magnificent burst on the scene, 71 stolen bases, 304. Could play second base or the outfield in his rookie year. Changes the game for the Expos. Definite game changer. If I was a commissioner and I said, with the first overall pick in the draft, the Expos select Tim Raines, I think I'd be pretty happy with that. And so it's going to come down to Tim Raines or Steve Rogers, but Tim Raines makes sense in the first round, and Rogers in the second round. All right, the second team is Oakland. So let's start by looking at the A's, and I do know they've got some nice pitchers you can improve here. Right off the top of the gate here. You got Langford and Keogh, who had their career years when Billy Martin took over as manager in 1980-81. Let's go look at the 384 again for Oakland. And I believe I just selected those 2 guys. Yeah, Keogh's 80, Langford's 81. Okay, that's nice. It's not quite... Improving a player is usually not a first-round pick kind of thing because you lose a draft choice. In other words, if you improve a player, you're still stuck with the same number of players. And therefore, when the draft ends and everybody has 20 on your team, you only have 19. Then you got to go sign a guy off the street for the 20th roster spot. So that's why it's not a lucrative move, but it might be a necessity at a certain point in the draft. Your keepers are Gross, Lacey, Mitchell Page, Tom Poquette. Nothing screams first-round pick out of that. So let's go in 81 and see if there's a young Oakland kid in this organization that's not in the league yet. Uh-oh, I see him. We got Tony Armas, Tim Blackwell, Keith Drumright, Jim Easterly, Greg Harris, Mike Heath, Rick Honeycutt, Mary Mendoza, Kelvin Moore. But it's Tony Armas, and it could be the year of 81, but we can scroll back to the previous year for Oakland and find him there as well. He couldn't get into the league last year because they picked Ricky Henderson and Jeff Jones. But Oakland also has the rights to Armas, Mike Heath, Charlie Leibrandt, Jamie Quirk, Chuck Rainey, Dave Stapleton, who they stole from the Red Sox. That's a nice pick, by the way. He hit .321 in 1980. Sammy Stewart, stolen from the Orioles. It's Tony Armas. I think 35 homer Tony Armas, and Oakland was defined by the outfield of Henderson, Dwayne Murphy, and Tony Armas. So Armas would complete the trio. I like him as a first-round pick and the second pick in the draft. He's a star, at least in 1980. Gold Glove ability as well. The Cubs pick third. Let's look at the Cubs carry-on, guys, because I think they got an interesting option here. There you go. So the Cubs have Bill Madlock on the team already with a 78 card, but if they were to bump him up to his 81 card, which doesn't belong to the Cubs, belongs to the Pirates, I believe, he leads the National League in hitting again for like the second or third time with a .341 batting average. So, like I said, I don't like to improve guys in the first round, but that when you get a batting champion, it's worth doing it. This is an interesting kind of thing to consider. I like to keep Hall of Fame players on their proper team trajectories. Madlock's in a precarious spot here. He moved around baseball a lot. With the Giants, with the Cubs, with the Pirates, with the Dodgers. Probably another team I forgot in there. Won some batting titles. I think he was an All-Star Game MVP one year. So, it could be that the Cubs dangle Bill Madlock in a trade to perhaps an expansion team, comes to mind. Remember I talked about players who bounce around baseball are good candidates for expansion teams. So, Madlock is probably trade bait at this point, which could help the Cubs. Sell high, you know. And aside from that, let's look at the Cub Keepers. And here we go. Jerry Morales, Bobby Mercer, Rick Russell, Bruce Sutter. Okay, got a Hall of Famer in there. And these are keepers now, which means you don't have the player. You have the rights to the player. The player's card expired in '77, the year before this. So you have to pick them again. It's a different situation than Madlock. So, Hall of Fame Bruce Sutter, I think, is your first pick in the draft. You know, because don't forget, the Cardinals get him by 1981. So if I'm the Cubs, I'm holding on to him all the way as long as I can till at least 1980, and try and fight for another year or two after that. So I'm holding on to Sutter. Russell's another interesting case. I don't think statistically these are good years, though. Actually, 78 is good. The rest of it's kind of meh for Russell. Mercer's kind of starting to get kind of average now. He had a nice little run in the early 70s. He's starting to get kind of ordinary here. Morales is not there. He's just a lifetime kind of platoon outfield type. Let's see what the Cubs had going on in 1981 and 1980. So in 81, Jody Davis burst on the scene, but it's not a good year. It's .256, .694 OPS. Lee Smith burst on the year. Not that great a year either. .351 ERA and a .132 WHIP. That's okay. Not really first round pick. Again, they're going to be good Cubs, but not quite yet. And then the 80 class, oh boy, it's not very good. Dennis Kinney, Rafael Ramirez. It's got to be Sutter. I mean, you're looking for a pedigree here in the first round. If I said Bruce Sutter's your first overall pick, I think everybody would be pretty happy, including the Cubs. All right, next up, the White Sox. Crosstown. Bad year in Chicago for both squads. Now, the White Sox, none of their current 12 guys are worth getting better, which is not always, that's not good news. Who do the White Sox want to keep to add to their dozen? Francisco Barrios, Jim Essien, Oscar Gamble, Eric Soderholm. Okay, believe it or not, we've got a star here. And you're like, who? And I'm like, well, It's 1979 Oscar Gamble. In only 126 plate appearances, the dude at 389, 452, 1187. His card, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, they didn't print a 389 hitting gamble card. They printed a 357 hitting gamble card, but it's devastating. White Sox need that. They need something. They need a spark. They're in a division with George Brett's Kansas City Royals and Robin Yount's Milwaukee Brewers. The White Sox got to get some flash somewhere. So 79 gamble, that's your pick. If you're familiar with that card, if you played Strat and you know what that card looks like, you'd understand how much of a no-brainer that is. Okay. Here's an expansion team, Portland. They should get on the phone with the Cubs and say, hey man, can we get Bill Madlock? Since we might not have anybody good and you could dangle Madlock to an expansion team like Portland. Just a thought. Let's see who Portland in their Dirty Dozen. I guess I'll start calling them that. Chet Lemon gets a little better in 79 and 78. Otherwise, not much improvement there. The Portland squad. Okay. Charlie Huff, Art Howell, Terry Poole, Eric Rasmussen. Nothing screams first round pick. Eric Rasmussen has a very nice 1979, 117 whip. Terry Poole has a nice... No, he doesn't hit 300, does he? It's 289. It seemed like he hit 300, but it was actually 289 3 years in a row. Okay. Art Howell at 296 one of those years. And Charlie Huff is, well, he's Charlie Huff. Always puts a lot of guys on base with a knuckleball and yada yada. So let's see if there's a rookie. Normally, these expansion teams don't get rookies that are very good because it means that the team that the guy actually played for, Major League Baseball, let him go. Portland, Steve Hammond, Danny Heap, Billy Smith, the pitcher, not the hitter, Gary Ward, and Ed Whitson. No. Nothing there of first round significance. And in the 80 class, Danny Ainge, Mark Bombach, Dan Graham, Dave Tobick, Alex Trevino, John Vukovic. Dan Graham's an interesting 1980 card. A hard platoon, kind of a left-handed slugger, puts his foot in the bucket, kind of like a Jim Tomei type. All homers and not much else. And he only did it for 300 at-bats and his career was over. But that's a nice card. But it's not first-round material. So if I'm Portland, I'm probably the first team that's going to talk to the Cubs and say, look, we'll give you some of our guy. We want Madlock. We want something. And Portland they have good guys on their team they could send to the Cubs. Barry Foote, former Cub. Let's see, John Milner, Bob Horner. I mean, they got a good 12 guys. Terry Forster, Dave Frost. If I'm Portland, I'd trade out of that spot or get talk to the Cubs about Madlock, and if not Madlock, find some other team. Portland needs to trade for a first-round pick or get out of the first round altogether. All right. Team 6, the Mets. Actually, this is pretty good. Let's look at the carry-on Mets are pretty interesting, very interesting. And you'll see, look at the shading here. Oh boy, I got a red for Joel Youngblood. Because in 1981, Joel Youngblood was your Major League Baseball's leading hitter with a .350 batting average. That was the year of the strike. And yeah, that'd be worth bumping him up to that card. Cost them a draft pick. First round pick. Well, the card is definitely a first round pick. However, bumping Youngblood's card up takes some of the value away, because it means that the Mets are still stuck with 12 guys. And you'd like to add a 13th guy in the first round with a stellar player. They also have Pete Falcone having his best year in 1981. So, and also, they have Pete Rose at third base. And this was the stipulation that he'd play one more year with them before he goes to the Phillies. And his big years in the Phillies are 79 and 81, but it's also by playing first base. And the Mets have no third baseman, and they have a couple guys who can play first base. Bob Beal, Lee Mazzilli, are a couple guys. So let's keep going with the Mets, assuming we don't do the young blood thing, because they also have some keepers to consider. Steve Henderson, speaking of that, he's got a really nice 79 and a really nice 81 card. Ray Knight has a nice 79 card with the Reds, 318. If he can play third base at 318, you could move Rose to first, bump him up, or trade out of him, trade him to the Phillies. Jerry Remy's got some 300 cards here, as Claudell Washington's got a nice 81 card. The Mets have a lot of options here, but I'm thinking of biting the bullet and just going Joel Youngblood, because they get 350. 350 is 350, folks. And like I say, best player available. If you sandbag Youngblood and say, oh, I'll pick Joel Youngblood in the second and third round, who's best player available? A 313 hitting second baseman, a 291 hitting outfielder? See, it doesn't make sense. So I think BPA, it's got to be Youngblood. It's just that they're going to lose a draft pick by doing that. All right. 2 more teams, and we'll call it for the night. Pick this up next time. Toronto, nice team. They overachieved and won a lot more games than I thought they were going to win in a tough division, because they're really not ready yet. There's one guy here that they acquired in the expansion draft that Milwaukee is missing, and that is Ben Oglevy. They have him already in the carry-on league with a 78 card, but they could bump him up to his monster year of 1980, where he hit 41 home runs as property of the Milwaukee Brewers. Or they get on the phone with Milwaukee and say, hey, if you want your guy to hit 41 homers in a Brewer uniform, you got to cough something up. So he's a trade chip exclusively with Milwaukee, unless Milwaukee thinks they can still win without Oglevy, because Milwaukee has plenty of other stud hitters in that team. But missing Ben Oglevy and his 41 homers could really hurt that offense. All right, Toronto's keepers: Doyle Alexander, Barry Bonnell, Rick Cerone, Ross Grimsley. Bonnell, his good year is 83, and we're a couple years away from that. Rick Cerone, interesting case, his one magical year. A guy who made an entire career out of one season. Rick Cerone had a -4 arm in 1980, 277 batting average. He and Gary Carter were the only -4 arm catchers in Major League Baseball that year. -4 arm catcher gets you, if it's not in the first round, it's close to the second round. I mean, a -4 arm catcher just is killer in the way I play this. Doyle Alexander, he had a nice career, but in this particular 4-year sample, nothing really jumps off the page. So I don't see him being a first rounder. I could justify Cerone's arm added to he has power and he hits 277. I could justify Cerone with that arm to be a first round pick. But let's look at the 81. And 81 was a terrible year for Toronto. They were awful. Their top hitter at 250, I believe. So in 81, they have Danny Ainge, Jim Anderson, Jim Clancy, who's not good. Damaso Garcia led the team in hitting at 252 and a 581 OPS. That's terrible. Jack Cusick, Luis Leal is okay. Rufino Linares, Hoskin Powell, Dave Schmidt, John Verhoeven, Ernie Witt, Al Woods. No. Just no. And then in 80, there's going to be an Al Woods in here, I believe, again. And there's a lot of guys in 80. A huge list of let's go back to 80. Mike Barlow, Jim Clancy. Good but not great. Damaso Garcia hits 278. Joe Nolan hits 312 as a part-time catcher. Al Woods does hit 300, but his fielding is pretty bad. Ugh. You know, I could justify Cerrone to an expansion team. Minus forearm catcher. I might be the only guy in the world who values catcher's throwing arm as much more than probably other Strat-O-Matic players, but it basically means that you can't even attempt it the way I do it. You can't attempt to steal a stolen base. American League East, the Yankees still have Mickey Rivers. They signed Willie Wilson. Baltimore has Lowenstein. Boston, of course, doesn't have any speed. But, you know, if you're an expansion team, you're looking for every way to take advantage of your bad draw, the bad cards you're dealt, so to speak. So I like Cerrone here, I really do. Let's do the final team tonight, and that would be, surprisingly, the Dodgers, who cannot believe they're in this spot. They got the 8th pick in the draft because they had a bad year, 12-14, and finished the 4th place, and they get this lottery ticket, really. An 8th overall pick in the draft is really high for them. Improving the current Dodgers. Let's see what we can do with them. Only Bert Hooton has a really good 81 would be an improvement, but otherwise, that's a good Dodger team. The 12 Dodgers are pretty good. And they have a nice long list of keepers that should keep them busy analyzing who to go for. Here we go. Oh my goodness. You have Dusty Baker, Davey Lopes, Bill Russell, Reggie Smith. So there's your 1st round pick and probably your 2nd round pick and probably the 3rd round pick. I guess we'll look at the rookies too. But, you know, Baker, arguably the best part of his career is here. 842 OPS in 80. Lopes has a monster 79. 836 OPS. Bill Russell, not so much. Reggie Smith, though, my goodness. Reggie Smith is still bringing it with his 3rd team after the Red Sox and Cardinals. Reggie Smith, 942 OPS in 78. 29 bombs. He gets hurt in 80. Remember him being in the All-Star game. 825 OPS. Excuse me. 900 OPS. Excuse me, in 80. It was 825 and 79. I think Reggie Smith's got to be your 1st round pick. He's 33, 34, 35 years old too. That's amazing. What a great player Reggie Smith was. Hard to believe he'd still be a 1st round pick in his early 30s. You know, you'd figure his game would decline, but it doesn't. He just mashes for the Dodgers. Smith is better than Baker. Lopes, if you factor in the base stealing, 79 is a great year for Lopes. But hey, let's look at the rookies. I think there's going to, well, Pedro Guerrero was selected away from them. Oh, yeah, I think I heard there's a kid from Mexico here. It's pretty good, if I'm not mistaken. Or he get taken in expansion. So the 81, Fernando's not here. Fernando got taken by the Arizona Diamondbacks in expansion draft. Stayed in the National League West, but instead of going to California, went to Arizona for the Arizona Diamondbacks. And he'll be their 1st round pick. But the Dodgers still have some good guys here. So they got 81 Kirk Gibson away from the Tigers, who hit 328. They got 81 Clint Hurdle away from the Royals, who hit 329. My goodness. Steve Sachs. They got Steve McCaddy away from Oakland with his best year. I don't remember that. My gosh. This rookie class is insane. And then an 80, Flannery, Honeycutt, Glenn Hubbard, Rick Sutcliffe, but not his good year, his 2nd year. He was Rookie of the Year in 79, I think, but 80's not very good. Well, here's the thing. If the other team, if the owners of Kirk Gibson and Clint Hurdle previously, the Tigers and the Royals, select those guys in an earlier year, they could beat the Dodgers to the punch. The Dodgers would probably take Reggie Smith, and the Tigers would take 1980 Kirk Gibson, and the Royals would take 1980 Clint Hurdle. is a thought there. And that, I think we'll wrap it up there with the first 8 overall picks in the draft as a possibility. It's looking good for everybody except for perhaps Toronto and Portland, but then again, they're expansion teams. You expect them to struggle. Hope you're enjoying this kind of way of looking at 4-year carryover history. Thanks for checking out the video, and we'll see you next time.